The first metallic bells rang some 5,000 years ago near the dawn of the Copper Age. Perhaps inspired by organic gourds and rattles, bells developed independently across several cultures and have adorned our clothing, enlivened ceremonies, and protected livestock for millennia. Hawk bells first appeared in the historical record as early as the 5th century, and within a few hundred years, their use was common throughout the many cultures and regions where the sport was practiced. Today, the science of bell making for falconry may be at its apex, but it remains an arcane and complex art, practiced by a relatively few and dedicated craftspeople. Master falconer Jim Ince specializes in flying falcons at a range of quarries from snipe to ducks. Practicing since the 1960s, Jim has witnessed both the decline and return of the Passage Peregrine, as well as the development of radio telemetry and GPS. His fondness for Tiercel peregrines and merlins reflects the rich but relatively enclosed country of his native southeast Texas. Through it all, the humble hawkbell has been a constant feature of his falconry.
Well, of course, that's all we had to start off with when I started back in the 60s, where there was no telemetry. And so everybody used two bells. And then in the early 70s, we started getting telemetry, and then, that's evolved greatly over the years. I still use one bell and one transmitter because I'm flying mostly Tiercel peregrines that are waiting on over my head in Houston, Texas. And I have to watch where I run because there's a fire ant hill about every 10 feet, and you will end up on your face if you don't watch where you're going. So I like to be able to hear the bird. I know the bird, is up 300 to 500 feet right over my head, and so it helps me a lot.
An engineer by trade, Jim first applied his meticulous eye and steady hand to creating fine hoods for himself and friends. He then challenged himself with bell making, modeling his creations after the style of late German bell maker George Richter.
These are Richter bells, and the beauty of these bells is they're very light, and I think that's what distinguished them from other bells. As Borno used metal that was about 16 thousandths thick, and so they're a little heavier, and that was traditionally what bell makers used and still use. But these are made out of 10 or 12 thousandths thick material, so they're much, much lighter. But with that lighter material, he had to put a reinforcement pad right there at the hinge, which is where the bell always cracks. And so it's a lot of work to put that reinforcement pad on there, which is why most people don't bother to do it. But if you've got a hard-hitting falcon, I've had birds come back with bruised feet from heavy bells, and so I was really determined that this is the type of bell that I wanted to make.
The Archives of Falconry is proud to present this master class with Jim Ince, as he fashions a pair of hawk bells in the distinctive style of George Richter from his workshop in Houston, Texas. Jim will lead us through the steps he takes to cut, shape, join, and finish the bells, and will introduce us to the various tools and techniques required to do the job, many of which have been pioneered by Jim Ince himself.